On this edition of the program, what the Democrats can learn from the Tea Party, MSNBC's shakeup, the latest on what's happening in the House, and some Ukraine talk with a man who dedicated his life to feeding refugees, Brian Sack, back on the program. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for February 26, 2025. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas, doing our best to try to keep this information about as current as we possibly can. Things obviously fluid in Washington, D.C. and around the globe. Breaking just as we are going live, a mineral deal is signed between the United States and Ukraine, paving the way for a more aligned peace process, one that has been turbulent thus far. We're going to have Brian Sack on a little bit later to talk about that. In our update, we got a lot to go over, including Dan Bongino, the man who inherited Rush Limbaugh's coveted time slot, is now the second in command of the FBI. Whew, boy. And MSNBC is in turmoil. But we begin with this.
I'll tell you what, I have an idea. You know, the new administration's big on computers and technology. How about this, President and administration? Why don't you put up a website to have people vote on the internet as a referendum to see if we really want to subsidize the losers' mortgages, or would we like to at least buy cars and buy houses in foreclosure and give them to people that might have a chance to actually prosper down the road and reward people that could carry the water instead of drink the water.
Hey, Rick,
that's a novel idea.
Hey, Rick, did you?
What? Who thought of that?
Yeah, they're like putty in your hands. Did you hear?
No, they're not, Joe. They're not like putty in our hands. This is America. How many of you people want to pay for your neighbor's mortgage that has an extra bathroom and can't pay their bills? Raise their hand. How about we all? President Obama, are you listening?
How about we all stop paying our mortgage? It's a moral hazard.
This is like mob rule here. I'm getting scared. I'm glad I'm.
Why don't you guys don't get scared, Joe. They're already scaring you. You know, Cuba used to have mansions and a relatively decent economy. They moved from the individual to the collective. Now they're driving 54 Chevys. Maybe the last great car to come out of Detroit.
They're driving them on water, too, which is a little strange to watch at
there
times.
You go.
Hey, Rick, how about the notion that Wilbur pointed out you can go down to 2% on the mortgage.
You can go down to minus 2%
and still have 40% and still have 40% not be able to do it. So why are they in the house? Why are we trying to keep them in the house?
Mr. Summers is a great economist, but boy, I'd love the answer to that one.
Jason,
you get people fired up.
Jason, you want to?
We're thinking of having a Chicago Tea Party in July. All you capitalists that want to show up to Lake Michigan, I'm going to start organizing.
What are you jumping in this time?
That is CNBC contributor Rick Santinelli going on an on-air rant in 2009, giving the name for a movement that would define American politics for several years afterward, the Tea Party. The cry for fiscal responsibility at a time when some folks believed that America was teetering on the edge of socialism became something that defined Republican opposition to the Obama presidency. I've been thinking a lot about the Tea Party lately because of one word, something that was said a lot in the liberal enclaves that I was milling about during the Obama years, and that is AstroTurf. The idea that the protests that the Tea Party were having were not really populist uprisings. They were not grassroots. They were fake. Paid protesters sent by billionaires. AstroTurf made to look like it was something that it wasn't. I mean, after all, what working class movement started on CNBC. The reason why astroturfing has popped up a lot lately is because of this.
Elon was going to be the main topic tonight, and he's going to continue to be the main topic tonight because we are all freaking pissed off about this. You're going to hear it and feel it.
Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So I would like to know, rather, the people would like to know what you, congressmen, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
That was last week, where Representative Rich McCormick, a Republican, held a town hall meeting in Roswell, Georgia, and there was a gigantic vocal element of that gathering that really had something to say. And now it's the Republicans that are on the other side of the astroturfing argument, saying that this is not a real populist uprising. So is it? We'll get to that in a second. First, let's understand the Tea Party. Santelli's tirade is widely credited for the name of the movement, but other grassroots organizers were already at work on the Tea Party movement. For example, Kelly Cardner, a blogger in Seattle, had begun rallying against Obama's proposed $787 billion stimulus, dubbed the Porculus protest, even before Santelli's rant. About 100 people attended her demonstration in mid-February 2009. But within weeks of the rant, Tea Party chapters and protests began springing up throughout the country, coordinated through the then nascent social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. The movement never really had a single founder or central leader. It was always a diffuse coalition of local groups united by a shared ideology of limited government. Early on, conservative media personalities play an important role in amplifying the cause. Notably, Fox News host Glenn Beck and others promoted Tea Party themes on television, talk radio, and more. Prominent Republican figures, including Sarah Palin, supported as well. But it was always the protests that were the most impressive. The first coordinated Tea Party protest happened that same February as Santelli's rant. It was followed by a larger spate of protests on Tax Day in April, where an estimated 250,000 left their houses. And that's Republicans. Republicans just, by a general rule, leave their houses less than Democrats. That summer, as Obamacare barreled down the track, the movement dispatched to town halls, not unlike McCormick's, where it was Democratic politicians who were blistered.
Snapshots from the healthcare debate in Michigan.
I want to know if it's coming out of my paycheck. Yes or no?
Your employer supports you.
I want an answer to the question. Is the money coming out of my paycheck?
In Georgia.
They've decided that we're just stupid.
You in Congress have a Cadillac health care plan.
In Florida.
And I don't want the government to do it for me.
I am not a right-wing wacko.
After people were told they could only submit written questions, a town hall meeting with Michigan Congressman John Dingell got ugly.
I have a question for this young man.
Go sit down and we'll
I have a question for this young man.
The man refused to sit down, so he and his wheelchair-bound son were ejected by police.
Electorally, the Tea Party had teeth. At least enough to flip the House and run out some blue dogs out of districts that were predominantly conservative. But it wasn't enough to topple the top of the party, which is why you got a decidedly un-Tea Party candidate in Mitt Romney in 2012. So what is similar between the Tea Party and the Democratic protests that we are seeing right now? 3 things. Number 1, it's never too early to be angry. Santelli's rant was nearly a month after inauguration for Obama. It is similarly around the same time now. When people are mad at a president, they should just be mad and loud about it. Number 2, it can move votes, but don't expect it to totally overturn the apple cart. You are coalescing a grassroots that can be the foundation of a movement, but it's not the entire shebang. And number 3, opponents of those protests should dismiss it as astroturfing at their own peril. Whenever people are activated enough to leave their house and scream at somebody, they're probably motivated enough to vote. And if it looks cool enough on television and on social media, then more people will come and do it. So what's different? Well, the lines with the Tea Party were a little bit cleaner. You had a very popular president in Barack Obama that some part of the country just quite simply did not like. You also had an outgoing Republican president that a lot of Republicans didn't like. They weren't a fan of the wars, and especially on the fiscal side, they thought they elected somebody that said he was going to continue to bring down the deficit, that was going to continue the work that was done in the 90s by Newt Gingrich. And instead, after his first year in office, President George W. Bush found 911 reasons to balloon the national debt. So not only did you have a party that was not listening to their hardcores, you had an avatar that you could scream and yell against that was on the other side of the fence. Now, that could be something that very much speaks to disaffected working class liberal voters. But you do have to be careful as to why you are out there in the streets or at these town hall meetings yelling and screaming, because the message does matter for growth, not for the people that are out there. But then again, those people are probably not going to vote for the other side anyway. When you're talking about growth, how people see these protests and whether or not they decide they want to join them, the message matters. And right now, I don't think the Democrats have found it. If it's simply opposition to Trump, then it's the same. And if it's Doge and Elon Musk, well, there's no guarantee that Elon Musk is going to be in Washington, D.C. in 3 weeks, let alone in 2 years when the next election happens. Quite simply, in my opinion, for electoral politics, it doesn't matter what emails he sends or what databases he has access to. Elon is not a long-term winner for the Democratic Party. And I think most elected Democrats, they know that too, which is why most of them have their eyes on Capitol Hill Tuesday and Wednesday, because that is when Republicans in the House are going to try to pass their budget. In that budget, there is a mandate to cut $880 billion from, I want to get this right, the Energy Commerce Committee. Probably doesn't sound like much to you either. But this will. That's what houses Medicaid. Many people are wondering how you cut $880 billion out of that committee without taking it from Medicaid. And should that be the case, that the Republicans are looking to cut Medicaid so they can extend the Trump tax cuts, well, now you've got a very familiar song, an ancient battle hymn of the liberal left, something that is just as potent to their hardcores and in affectable independence. And that is, why are these Republicans gutting your Medicaid so they can pay their rich friends? It is something that resonates in the same way that on the right side you can say, why are these liberals spending us into oblivion? Should the Republicans pass that budget, and should the Democrats be able to message this effectively, and no matter what you think about the Democratic Party, if they can't get on the same page to sing that song, then yes, they all need to be fired. Well, you might have yourself a grassroots movement. We got the update, then Brian Sack. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's where you support this very show. head on over there right now. Go ahead and get on the team, man. Get your 2 bonus episodes each and every week. One on Monday, one on Thursday. And we have adjusted our Thursday schedule. So now that is going to be available for you on Thursday morning. And yeah, get all the latest. And there's going to be a lot here because, we don't have it in this update. Anything on the mineral rights deal, because that is just breaking right now. And we don't have anything on the latest of what is going to happen with that House budget. But, we will then. And that's when you're going to get it, because you don't get an episode between now and the Friday episodes. And that's going to be Friday's news. Anyway, go ahead. Join the team. It's a good time. $12 a month. Or go ahead and sign up. $99 a year. That's a bargain, buddy. That's a bargain. 150 episodes of the show for less than $100. Huh. Less than $1 an episode. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. That's like getting one of those old cans of soda back when you were a kid. Speaking to all the Gen Y folks out there and above. Let's get into the news. President Donald Trump appointed Dan Bongino as the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Bongino, a former New York City police officer and U.S. Secret Service agent, has been a prominent conservative media personality and staunch supporter of Trump. Despite lacking prior experience within the FBI, he is set to serve under newly confirmed FBI Director Kash Patel. Bongino's career includes service in the NYPD from 95 to 99, followed by a tenure in the Secret Service from 99 to 2011, where he was part of presidential protection under George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Transitioning to media, he became known for his political commentary, hosting the Dan Bongino Show and Fox News program Unfiltered until April 2023. In his new role, Bongino will oversee the Bureau's daily operations, making a significant shift from his prior role as a hot take artist. So there was rumors that Bongino would be the new head of the Secret Service. That obviously didn't happen. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who was around the DC environs. And we both agreed, well, why would you want to take an actual job when you make $10.5 million just horsing off into a microphone? I know that I make far less than that horsing off into a microphone, and I would have a hard time relinquishing this job if it meant going into government service where I actually had to work for a living. And second in command of the FBI is, it's up the org chart, but we're talking about real work here. We're talking about meetings. So he's going to have to pause his role. And in that media ecosystem, man, once you're gone, you're gone. Somebody takes over. Somebody goes and continues to roll the rock forward. People need their conservative talk radio from noon to 3 in the El Rushbo slot. I have my own questions about exactly how fit for this office he is, but there is no doubt that he is sacrificing to take it. This is not something that I think is done lightly. He must really, really, really want to do something. Now, whether or not he'll be able to do it, we'll see. We talk a little bit more about this with SAC coming up.
I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible, and I do not defend it.
That was Rachel Maddow on her program Monday. MSNBC is undergoing a significant primetime restructuring under new President Rebecca Cutler. Former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki will assume the 9 p.m. slot from Tuesday to Friday, starting in late April, replacing Alex Wagner, who will continue as a senior political analyst. The 7 p.m. hour, previously occupied by The Readout with Joy Reid, will transition to The Weekend, a panel show featuring Simone Sanders Townsend, Michael Steele, and Alicia Menendez. This change follows Reid's departure from the network. Additional adjustments include the cancellation of weekend programs hosted by Eamon Maldian, Jonathan Capehart, and Katie Fong. Ali Velshi's weekend show will expand from 2 to 3 hours. The network also plans to close its Miami operations, affecting Jose Diaz-Balart Reports and The Katie Fang Show. Diaz-Balart will continue anchoring NBC's Weekend Nightly News, while Fang will remain as a legal correspondent. These changes were part of a broader strategy to revitalize MSNBC's programs and news operations, including establishing a Washington bureau and enhancing domestic and international reporting. So, MSNBC, like much in the world of television, is not doing great right now. Not great. Not great. I am kind of shocked that you haven't seen maybe a Maddow get let go. Although Joy Reid was apparently making like a lot of money, like well into the millions. But the audience just isn't there. And we're probably going to see this. I don't think this is just a like liberal or conservative, although Fox News is doing well, but I think that they've been better about getting hosts that seem to have a bit of a broader audience. That being said, I think that this is just where cable's going. Cable is going back to the 90s. You're not going to see these networks have these sprawling operations in multiple cities with big glittering studios that are overlooking gorgeous high rent locales. Everything's going to be done out of a closet in Secaucus. Pretty much it. That's what I think from here on out. Now, if it's politics, maybe it's all going to be in that same building right outside the Capitol in DC. But other than that, everything's going to be in a closet. I think you're going to have 5 or 6 key talent on either show. And then past that, you're going to see a lot of things that are meant to just eat up innings, eat up time. Because I think there's just, the money's not there. The cable bundle's dying. Over-the-top streaming numbers are not what people hoped. It's not replacing cable in the way that they wanted it to. So not a great time for cable in general, but there we go. Both CNN and MSNBC now making big, splashy staff cuts. And finally, New York City Mayor Eric Adams is confronting a challenging re-election campaign that officially begins this week amid legal and political turmoil. He asserted during a press conference on Monday that his team will begin collecting signatures to secure his place on the ballot. His campaign infrastructure appears underdeveloped, and that's saying something. It lacks a clear management team. It lacks a general consultant. It lacks media strategists. Key advisors from his 2021 campaign, such as Evan Thies and Nathan Smith, have not confirmed their involvement. Additionally, a long-serving aide distanced herself due to her own legal battles. And one staunch defender has not disclosed her role in the campaign just yet. Compounding all these issues is that Adams has been denied $4 million in public matching funds, intensifying the difficulties he faces as a primary in June, which we will be covering in the city that never sleeps. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo is poised to enter the race, further complicating Adams' path to re-election. That official announcement should happen sometime soon. It was during this press conference on Monday that Adams announced the closing of the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan as an asylum seeker processing facility. He remained defiant, painting his advocacy for stricter border policies in the face of his own party's president as the reason that he could be trusted with a second term as mayor. The primary election is scheduled for June 24th, 2025. It's going to be uphill. It's going to be uphill. And ultimately, we're really going to see how much Adams and Cuomo take from each other. Because they have the same constituency. I think they're probably going to largely have a lot of the same message, because if Adams was a moderate before, he is now more down the ideological spectrum. He is now tilting out into, possibly even on New York standards, center right. Cuomo's whole thing, his shtick, is that he is a moderate. And I'll just say this about Cuomo. I'm not saying that he can't win this race. He would be my favorite to win the race. He is my favorite to win the race. He's not the old Cuomo. He's not Biden bad, but his voice doesn't have quite the same boom to it. I think these last few years have kind of weathered him. We'll see what happens when the rubber meets the road here. Doesn't appear that Adams is going down without a fight. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to support this program. And now, Brian Sack. Joining us back on the program, the one, the only Brian Sack. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a while since we've talked, and it's at some point I just have to bring you on so we could just be funny about the news, because you're a very funny guy. And I feel like the times that I brought you on have just been in like deadly serious scenarios revolving around.
It was my son, my son's school melting down over the
education,
DEI, which is all in the news now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it turns out you were on the edge of where society was going with that.
Years ahead. But I remember that you said it was kind of like there was a 50-50 between, supporting me, disagreeing with me. And I was like, they'll see the light eventually.
By polling, they have. And that is something that I guess we can start there. Is there any schadenfreude you have of that, or is it just relief that this is something that is kind of over?
I have a shit ton of schadenfreude. I've been talking about this for years. I mean, I've been dealing with it myself since around 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So then watching what's happening, it's kind of like, kind of told you. I mean, I told you what it touches. When people experience it firsthand, they don't like it.
Yeah.
When they hear about the word, because the words sound, diversity, equity, inclusion, those are nice words they said. But when you actually get to see what happens with that ideology, and it starts touching things you like, then you realize, this is not good. Yeah.
I think the other thing that doomed it was it also was just a middle layer of bureaucracy that at the end of the day was always kind of doomed to fail, because even beyond, the education thing is the lightning rod. And that's where you're going to get the most passionate reactions for all the reasons that you went over when you were extraordinarily passionate about it. But like the other side of it is like, nobody wants to go to a meeting, an extra meeting they have to. Nobody wants to report to another thing, while they're going about their business. And this was like an entire layer of business on top of every business and educational outlet that you've seen.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that now that you look at it, you're like, wow, it's kind of crazy that went on as long as it did.
That's how I felt at the time. And I kept thinking, like, how did other people not realize how crazy this is? But I just think it's because they hadn't had direct contact with it. And then, then slowly stories come out in the news, and like, okay, that's a little weird, and that's a little, okay. And then teachers standing up and whistleblowing and all that. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And obviously any kind of educational situation is just going to be magnified by 10, because depending on how many kids you have, that's how many chances you get to educate them. Right? Like that's high stakes stuff.
Yep.
All right. Well, the other thing that we brought you on about, because we refuse to let you be funny, is your work in Ukraine, and that is, or with Ukrainian refugees rather, and that is what we bring you on now. For folks who didn't hear you the first time, can you just real quick bring everybody up to speed on the time that you spent out in Europe during, I guess, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, exactly. 3 years ago.
The beginning of this war.
Yeah, I'm at the beginning of the war, so 3 years ago, today, and I basically was watching. My wife's Polish, and I've spent the last 25 years going to Poland, and and I'm very close to Poland, and Poland and Ukraine have a lot of similarities. And so when the war started, I was really agitated because it was looking like my in-laws being killed and my wife's villages being blown up, that kind of thing, and it really upset me. And I wound up volunteering for World Central Kitchen. Mm-hmm. Which is an NGO that feeds people. That's their mission. And I was out there about a week or two after the war started, and I was there for about 2 or 3 months. They wound up bringing me on board as a contractor, and I've been with them ever since. But that experience was really, profound for me. It's a wartime experience, and it was extreme. It brought everybody very close, very quickly, and it was a very meaningful experience in my. And then since then, I've kind of got addicted to the whole humanitarian aid thing. So that's my side hustle.
Yeah, exactly. Good. I'm glad you have something on the side to make a little scratch. Yeah. So remind me again, were you in Ukraine, or you were across the border in Poland dealing with the refugee outflow?
So we were in southeast Poland in a town called Przemyśl, and which I loved watching reporters not pronounce correctly. And so there we set up a huge kitchen that could, in a warehouse that had nothing. We just turned it into a kitchen that could do 100,000 meals a day.
That's amazing.
And then that would transit through Medica, which is on the border with Ukraine. So all that stuff. My wife forbade me from actually entering Ukraine. So, the trucks would go to Medica and several other crossing points, and we basically were feeding Ukrainians. And then the refugees were streaming over the borders. It was out of a World War II film. So they were coming off of trains and coming in by the thousands every day, and we were taking care of them, feeding them, and then there was a whole little city that grew up in Medica, which was all basically tents, providing all sorts of assistance: SIM cards, diapers, baby carriages, luggage, in our case, food. And it was lovely. It was great. It was a horrible thing, but it was also quite lovely. But it was children and their mothers and elderly, because of course the men could not leave Ukraine. So you had just a stream of these women, red eyes, holding a dog under one arm, and their 2 kids and the grandmother in the back, and it was extremely powerful.
And how long were you there?
About 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
That's intense. That's a lot of time.
It was a lot of. It became my life, and I was actually so focused on it, and the time went by very fast, and formed a lot of really close friendships with people, and and it was lovely. And amazing. It was great to and Poland, to watch the Polish actually rise up, and they would come to the train stations and leave baby carriages and car seats and all sorts of things, anything to help, offer rides across Poland if people needed it. It was lovely.
Now, we mentioned at the beginning that one of the reasons why you came on was DEI. That is something that the new Trump administration has very much taken a righteous hammer to, that you are happy about. Yes. I'm gathering from your social media that you are less thrilled with the foreign policy of Trump 47.
Not so happy about that. And, I'm having a hard time. I'm trying to process it because, there's this natural inclination, especially on the left, to anything Trump does is the worst thing in the world, and every molehill is Mount Everest, and I'm everything's a 5-alarm fire, and I'm trying to determine what's true and what isn't, and it just gets harder and harder these days.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't like the rhetoric. Calling Zelensky a dictator is absurd. Suggesting that they started the war is just insane.
Yes.
And then I'm trying to figure out, is this some kind of political game? Is he playing some kind of 5D chess thing that we don't understand? And I kind of don't feel like that's the case. He doesn't strike me as much of a diplomat. So it's really frustrating to watch, because I really obviously the people I know from the Ukrainian side are very upset, and rightly so. But I just don't know what's true and what's actually happening. But of course, it kind of feels like we're extorting Ukraine for minerals, which is a very China thing to do.
And this gets to, I think, the shared element of all right, well, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now that I don't think anybody could say is precedented, right? This is a very, very different view of how the government should run. It is something that the Trump administration, in many different ways, has a different fundamental relationship with the federal workforce. We'll see what happens legislatively, but certainly there's a lot of things that are different that are happening, and it's very challenging to understand exactly just what are the common facts, like what can we understand is true. And that's, you just hit on something that I've read multiple different ways. I know the commentary is all over the place with the mineral rights, where what I've read previously is that during Zelensky's first meeting with Trump, who just won the election, Zelensky brings Trump the idea for the mineral rights. And it's like, hey, this is a good thing. It's a win-win, blah, blah, blah. And
that's probably as bad as telling the car salesman that you love the car, because now they know they own you, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then, somewhere in between, we go from, we're going to solve the war, to Zelensky's a dictator. And what I don't know watching it is, the other reporting that's come out is that they had the mineral rights deal and then they gave it to Zelensky. Zelensky said he didn't want to sign it. They needed to negotiate more. And then it goes back and forth. And then all of a sudden, Zelensky's a dictator and Russia and Trump is a mouthpiece for Russian disinformation from either side. And it's like, all right, are these guys just hardballing? Like, or are we actually just like, now picking the other side of this fight? It doesn't, I genuinely just don't know.
That's exactly where I stand. I'm very hopeful that it's some kind of, and we know Trump insults the crap out of every single person, and he never has hard feelings later. It's like, his VP called him all sorts of names back in the day, and now it's like he's a VP. He doesn't care.
Yeah, this is what I always say. He gave out Lindsey Graham's personal phone number and then was golfing with him within a week. Yeah. Like there's like zero. He has a short memory when it comes to at least public insults.
Yeah. And and nobody seems to care. And it's just kind of, he does his thing and then he moves on. So I'm kind of hoping that, so he calls Zelensky like a middling comedian, just kind of, he's just an okay comedian. Like how many Zelensky comedies has Trump watched? Like, what does he know about Zelensky's comedy? But, that sounds like a very Trumpy thing to say. So
I think what really kind of crossed the line was you could have stopped the war. Like, if you're going to rank what people have been like apoplectic about,
right,
the number one thing is you brought this on yourself,
right,
and you could have stopped the war.
Right.
Below that, where you get into the like offensive, but there probably can be a conversation, is like the dictator / election issue, which I don't think if you really look into it for more than 2 seconds, it's like, an election would be pretty hard right now, and also
they didn't have one for Churchill, right? I mean,
within their constitution, I don't know if you go right to dictator.
Right.
Maybe you go overdo election for a year or two before we go right to dictator. But that's there, and then everything else I feel like is, just kind of personal with the, apparently he didn't like Zelensky's comedy. Which, subjective art form.
Sure. But what show did he watch?
I tried to watch the first episode of the show that catapulted him to fame, where he was the Hudsucker Proxy president, which he eventually got so popular that he became the actual president.
Right. They actually they both have very similar backstories when it comes to being a TV person who winds up as head of the country. So.
This is what I in my head, I'm like, I don't want to get too far down the like, this is absolute hell rabbit hole, because it's not outside the realm of possibility for me that the Truth Social in 2 days, when the ink is dry on this mineral deal, is just tough negotiator, brave, stood in the face, a great man who fought for his people. Like that's like, it does not shock. It wouldn't shock me at all. In fact, like part of me expects it. Part of me thinks that by Thursday, that's going to be the social media message.
That's what, I have my fingers crossed constantly, just kind of waiting for the next piece of news to come out. And it's frustrating, because anything that makes the Russians happy makes me sad. So when I see them gloating about this in their propaganda media, it's just like, oh, why are we doing this?
I guess, but that's also such a weird quirk of our modern world, where like we know what the Russian propaganda media says in a way that like maybe we should know less about that. Maybe we should be in our own sphere of influence, and we shouldn't be worried about like whatever they are saying, because whatever they're saying doesn't mean that it's necessarily good. Propaganda machines are not famously like perfect. And I don't know. I don't know how to square that into my into whatever rubric I have in my head to be like, okay, I don't know if short of Ukraine becoming the 51st state of the United States of America, and now this is a hot war between these two countries, I don't know what's going to happen. My basic understanding of warfare seems to be that this is still a lopsided battle, short of a lot of money coming in.
Which they're getting today. I mean, the UK and that's the other thing. So like today, the UK stepped in and they're going to give money, in Finland and a bunch of other countries. Yeah. And it's like, is that because, they see Trump dropping the ball, or is that by design? Like, I just don't know.
Yeah. Right. It is like, I would imagine nothing in Europe happens overnight. So nothing in Europe happened within the last week. If they're giving money, they were planning to give money 6 months ago.
Right. But he's gonna take credit for it in about 10 minutes. He's gonna be like, this was my idea.
100%. 100%. It's like he took credit for the new incoming chancellor of Germany, who was very critical of Trump. When they won yesterday, Trump's thought was like, a more conservative party won. Right. MAGA's on the march.
Yep. It's like, wow, okay.
But how do you see? I mean, like, have you cleared off your kitchen table, and do you have Kirks and the Donbass pushing tanks hither and yon to understand the military strategy of this?
No, I mean, I've followed it. Obviously, since the beginning, and it's really just a war of attrition at this point. I mean, which Ukraine really can't survive because Russia has more people and more willingness to get them killed. Yeah, and zero regard for life, and which is pretty much policy. I mean, if you look at any of their previous expeditions, Chechnya or Afghanistan, they really don't care about their soldiers. There are great books. There's one, Zinky Boys, which is about Afghanistan, and One Soldier's War. Or maybe I'm getting it backwards. One Soldier's War is about Afghanistan. Zingy Boys is about Chechnya, and those are really. I mean, they're both very similar in that they just don't care about their soldiers. There's corruption from top to bottom. Yeah, the commanders are just stealing what they can from their own soldiers or from the equipment. It's just crazy. But
that was my first lesson of Russian. Mission over lives thing was, and I forget in which order these two happened, but there was a terrorist hostage situation at a theater in Moscow.
Yep. Beslan. Oh no, that's a school. I'm sorry, that's a school massacre. No, you're talking about the play. The play, and the Russian authorities just said, "Oh yeah, no, we'll just kill everybody." Yep, let's gas
we
them all.
We don't care. We're gonna gas everybody. Like that'll show you. Like you can't keep hostages. And then the other one was the stranded Russian sub that I believe was off the coast of
the Kursk.
The Kursk in Alaska, where they ordered them to basically commit suicide and tank the sub, and for fear of America rescuing them and understanding what they had.
Yeah, we offered. We had a ship. We had a submarine rescue ship in the vicinity, and we offered our help, and they said no, thank you.
Yeah, I just let him die because it'd be better that it end up at the bottom of the sea and useless to everybody than for America to know. They have a different relationship with the individual lives versus their mission, and that would be probably the most charitable and poetic way to say it, as opposed to
nihilism.
They have a culture of death.
No, it's a nihilistic worldview, and it's been like that for quite some time. I mean, that's how you wound up with the 50s and the purges, and it's just. It's a different way of looking at things, and what's weird is like a lot of them feel that way. I mean, I have Russian friends, and one of the guys I worked with in Ukraine turned out to be Russia. Turned out to be a Russian, and I was like, oh God, what are you doing here? And he told me, he's like, I'm here because of the guilt and shame I feel at what my country is doing. Yeah. But he's few and far between, because in general, I mean, if you look at the videos coming out of Russia, there's a lot of support for this special military operation that was 3 days.
I would also, I mean, And that's the other thing that I have no idea is that it's like, aside from Tucker Carlson mooning over the produce of the Russian supermarkets, like, I don't know what Russian opposition is supposed to look like. Like when you can actually just be secret policed, disappeared because you uploaded a YouTube video saying that Vladimir Putin has a funny haircut. Like, I don't know. I mean, it would not shock me that everything that goes out that remains up is positive about that. So I have no idea what the Russian general mainline thought is. But let me go back to the meat grinder element of it and the war of attrition. So it sounds like you are more of the belief that this is probably as good of a time as there is going to be to have some kind of settlement.
I mean, I feel like we strung them along. So the Biden administration would give them a weapon and say, here's this great weapon. Don't use it to its full capacity. Yeah. And so we tied their hands for so long that I think we really could have been way far ahead if we had said, yeah, you can strike inside, you can do this, you can use these. And we didn't do that. We strung them along. And then, of course, as Biden's headed out the door, he's like, okay, you can shoot into Russian territory if you want. I was like, oh, great. That's nice. Thank you. So it's frustrating because I think we're at this point where, I mean, it's literally trench warfare, and they're just, and this outrageous use of drones, which is just changing warfare in general to something terrifying. And I know Ukraine can't afford to just sit there in trenches and suffer casualties, even though they're killing a lot more Russians than the Russians are killing Ukrainians. But
it doesn't matter when you are in a population deficit. Like they can lose a multiple of bodies to your body, and eventually they'll still they'll still attrit you to the point where what's going to be there left to rebuild if there's a continuing conveyor belt to death. Yeah, I kind of feel like, I mean, this is, now we're playing armchair general here, but like I feel like there was that moment last year where there was like a big incursion into Russia, that Ukraine was like holding Russian territory.
Right, into Kursk.
And I was like, man, this is the time where you want to float the trial balloons for a peace deal, right? Like when it looks the sunniest on your side. And that was, I remember 2 years ago, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, I was at a conference where there were a bunch of like, muckety mucks in the statecraft and intelligence space. And there was like a debate or a conversation about this. And there are people that know things. And I was like, okay, good. Now that we're outside of the media sphere, now that we're outside of like prying ears, this is all just a bunch of people that trust each other, that know things. Where do we think this is going to land? Let's just ask the question. Where do we take an educated guess? Normally, this kind of stuff isn't shocking. A war settlement is something that you could probably predict from the moment that the first shot rings out. But like, where do we think? What are the options? And everybody from the American side, we're like, well, we just got to support him. We just got to support him. And I'm like, yes, and. Yes, and.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, sure, yeah. I'm not saying no to that, but like.
To what end?
I mean, like, Crimea, we can agree Crimea is probably gone, right? Like, Crimea was gone, several years ago. Like, it would take a tremendous reshaping of how we understand the fight to understand. That, it's like, no, we just got to support him. All of Ukraine should return to Ukraine. And it's like, okay, there just seemed to be, with the Biden administration, this kind of, I don't know, like this lack of thought that there could be an end. Like nobody was even thinking about landing the plane. They were just trying to figure out how to refuel it midair more.
Yeah. There seemed to be no end game. And what is the end game? Because I would love to see Crimea returned. I would love to see Donetsk and Luhansk returned. But they've had those since 2014.
Yeah.
So, that's probably not going anywhere. So it's frustrating because I want Russia to lose so badly. I mean, I loathe Putin. I loathe their army. I mean, just the culture there's something wrong with them. It's like this broken culture that just wants to spread, and even though everybody hates when they show up.
Yeah.
You know, I look at all the Soviet. I mean, my wife. You know, when I first met her, she's Polish, and you know, she hated the Russians, and I couldn't understand. You know, couldn't understand why. But now I understand.
Now you get it. Now you get it.
When I got one time in 1990 when I was traveling right after college, and I was in Czechoslovakia, which no longer exists, but they had just shed the Soviet yoke. And I got off the train, and I was speaking to a money changing guy, and I started speaking to him in Russian. And he goes, "Do you speak anything else?" And I was like, "Yeah, English and some Spanish." And he goes, "Okay, let's speak that because fuck the Russians." It's been going on for a long time.
You know, last summer, my wife and I were in Serbia and
Montenegro?
No. Croatia. Yeah.
Croatia.
Serbia and Croatia. And it's those two former elements of Yugoslavia are particularly interesting because Serbia is very Russian influenced and Croatia is not. Croatia is very Western influenced.
We bombed the Serbs a little bit.
Oh, we certainly did. Staying in Belgrade, there are few places where, in general, I've always thought when everyone's like, oh, people hate Americans abroad, I've never had that experience.
Right.
I have always found it, even in places that don't necessarily love America.
Yeah.
You know, when an American walks in, we're friendly, we have money, you know, we sound like Iron Man to them. Like it's it's exciting. It's a fun little moment. Belgrade was a different vibe, and they had dusted off their old Clinton and Tony Blair are war criminals banners that they had out during the time that NATO bombed Belgrade, and they have not forgotten that NATO bombed Belgrade, and they are not happy about it. But then you cross over into Croatia, and these are the same people, man. Like, you know, and yet it is in the Western sphere, and it's just a totally different vibe. And
I mean, Ukraine is like that. I mean, you know, the closer you get to Russia, the more Russianized they are. The more, you know, and the more they have Russian heritage and family in Russia. It's kind of like Turkey. I mean, Istanbul is extremely Westernized, and then as you head east, you're like, oh, this is different. You know, so it's like the same.
That's what, this is the funny story. So we were driving, we rented a car and we were driving from Belgrade to Zagreb. And, we get told by our guide that we had been talking to in Belgrade, they're like, checkpoints are a pain in the ass now. Checkpoints are really, they're strict because Croatia is very strict about what comes in from Serbia and yada, yada, yada. So I was like, all right. What's the one thing they're not worried about at all? It's like Americans.
Right.
So when we get to the checkpoint, just trust me, babe. And I say to my wife, I'm like, we get there. It's just like, howdy, y'all. We're here for Croatia. And they're like, oh, great. Just don't even look at it. Push us along. To the left of us, there is a car that is being absolutely disassembled, like you would see at the U.S.-Mexico border because they're worried that there's going to be drugs in it. And the guy on it, I don't know if you can tell by clothes specifically that a man and a woman are Russian, but if you can, and they look like the bad guys in the first 5 minutes of an action movie that takes place at a club in Moscow, and the women that are attendant to that bad guy, that's what this dude looked like. It was just like a Russian club goer and his girlfriend who was in a mini dress at 8 o'clock in the morning, and their entire car was being disassembled by people. And it's like, wow, that is a big dividing line among the many between those two countries.
Yeah, I mean, these countries hold a grudge. They didn't like their experience in the past. When I first went to my wife's village in Poland, so this would have been 2000, and I see this building and it looks like a train depot, but it's an apartment building, and it looks like there's a train bridge, but there's no tracks. And I asked her, I'm like, is that a train depot? She goes, it was. I'm like, well, what happened? She goes, well, the Russians took all the train tracks with them back to Russia after the war. And that's what they do. I mean, they did this, Ukraine, they were stealing, toilets and washing machines. And it's just, there's something going on with those guys.
Well, all right. So let's talk about, if let's say the most straight line deal that is looked at as Russian favorable does happen. The one thing that I would say is true is that when this war began, and part of the underpinning of Kyiv falling within a day was the idea that Russia had the third or fourth most powerful military in the world. And it does not appear that that ranking would hold up. Like they have taken, this is Michigan losing to Kennesaw State, where they're not going to be in the same top 5 if the AP college poll were to be released in terms of military.
100%. I mean, their equipment is terrible. I mean, you could see at the beginning of the war, you could see, I mean, their tires were dry rotting because they were never maintained, and they were never maintained because of the culture of corruption that exists through their military from top to bottom. Everybody cuts corners. Everybody steals what they can. I mean, I don't know if you recall, there was what reactive armor is on a tank?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes.
So basically the explosive that's supposed to blow the projectile away. Well, one of the reactive armor had been replaced with egg cartons because the guy stole the explosives to sell. And this is the same in Chechnya. They were selling off they're called Fireflies, kind of like a bazooka type weapon. And they were selling these at Chechen markets to Chechens.
To shoot against the Russians.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and these were the commanders like, I got a couple extra of these things. I'll sell them at the market, make some money off of that. But this is, I mean, it's from top to bottom. Of course, when your head of state is a mafia thug and like a murderous, genuinely bad person, and, you can hate Trump all you want, but he doesn't compare at all to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Putin is a demon.
Yeah.
And there's so much death and carnage associated with that man. And, and he's, from the top and all the way down. I mean, it's just rotten. So you can't have the second best military because everything's too cheap. Everything's getting stolen whenever there's and the training's not there visibly.
Yeah,
I mean, you sit there, when you're training people to stand still when a drone's overhead. In the hopes that it might avoid you.
That's the one thing that again, very, very amateur understanding of world militaries and how ours stacks up to the Russias and Chinas of the world. But the one thing that you do see with top-down command and control economies and governments is what's happened with Russia now, and what you've heard throughout what makes it through the cone of silence, the great firewall in China,
right.
Which is that the endemic corruption within the military, where people are trying to take whatever they can and sell it, is something that erodes their preparedness for battle. Where here in the United States, we get ripped off up front.
Right.
Like we get, it's like everything we buy is going to cost 7 times as much and probably arrive late, but it will work.
Right.
Like it'll work when it gets there. Like it'll just take, several $100 billion before it arrives.
100%. Yeah. That toilet seat was $90,000, but man, it's really good.
But it's good. Where that money went when you sit down.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah. It's, I mean, our military is definitely, I mean, we spend for it. We obviously, have the most powerful military in the world. The thing that scares me about the Russian inability to maintain things is nuclear weapons require maintenance.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that? That concerns me a little bit.
You never know. It might just fall into the hands of some Chechen. It just is like, hey, you also can fetch a pretty penny.
Yeah.
All right, so cautious. You're hold on loosely now. You're just. Let's get to the bottom of the waterfall, and then you'll decide how happy or hurt you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of I'm watching it. I'm seeing the news. I was hoping for Joy Reid's take on it. But I guess we're not going to get that.
No. Unfortunately, what's crazy about that is so she gets let go, which just at the right time for that network, right on time. But then also they just slide people down the bench like it's a successful network, it's not a financial tire fire. Yeah. It's like really, you're not going to reach outside the tent now, even to just stay in the left side. There's no new voices on the left that you can pull in to kind of freshen things up a little bit. No, just Jen Psaki, just right there.
How about this one? It's like, okay, let's find out in 2 years.
Yeah,
yeah. It's
You know, I'm sure more airtime for Michael Steele is really gonna just supercharge these ratings. That's just gonna be dynamite.
I can't watch that stuff. That just, anything like that is just brain rot. Like Fox, MSNBC, any of that stuff just hurts. The View.
I had to stop. I was watching all 4 on silent because YouTube TV lets you do it. It was CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and then BBC.
Okay.
Which always, the one thing that I was always interested in is whenever they all went to the same live shot at the same time, because they all had their different thresholds for that. But yeah, MSNBC, it was at its best when after the debate, because it was like state television where they didn't know whether or not the Crown or the rebels were winning.
Right.
And so like one day it was like, Biden, biggest disaster. Will he drop out today? And then like 12 hours later, it's like, actually, the debate was not the disaster that many think it is. 17 experts agree.
Crazy amounts of copium.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it's great. But yeah, now the entire industry is falling apart. So who knows? Who even knows what's going to happen with cable news?
I don't. They kind of earned it.
Yeah.
I had a friend working for Newsmax. I said, "What are you up to these days?" He's like, "I'm working for Newsmax," and he goes, "Please don't tell anyone."
It's funny because I almost feel like those are going to be the economic things that will survive in the cable era, or whatever is going to be eventually the cable era, is like, there are these networks that are kind of shot out of a closet somewhere in either, Secaucus or Palm Beach, and you keep the overhead low. You don't have 17 studios. You reduce on staff. Everybody's working, 12-hour days. But it's like you can probably make that work for longer than whatever CNN is going to be able to continue to make work with like 50,000 contributors and 17 different glittering studios. That's probably, I got a feeling. I was actually talking to somebody who's in the television industry, and we were talking about just where cable's going. And I'm like, I kind of feel like it's going back to the 90s. Everything's going to be like MTV in 1997. It's like 5 signature personalities, and they're all shot out of the same closet. And that's pretty much it.
And then they go from that, like Dan Bongino, right into government.
Oh my God.
Explain?
If he would have survived, Rush Limbaugh would have been Secretary of State.
Yeah,
that. If Dan Bongino gets second in command of the FBI, then Rush Limbaugh would have been Secretary of State. He would have been negotiating with Putin.
I saw that headline. I'm like, is this the Babylon Bee? Or the Onion? What is this?
I know some people that are around the Secret Service, and there was a conversation about him taking over the Secret Service because he's a former agent, and at least that would make
more
sense. He's been in there before, but the conversation was like, yeah, but why would he give up $10.5 million a year to do that? That's actual work. Like, that's kind of the same thing here. It's like, on one hand, it's like, all right, is he qualified? I don't think so.
Right.
That doesn't appear to be somebody that has the qualifications. But at the same time, almost equally baffling is why on earth would he give up $10.5 million a year to take a job that is like actual work, that is like actual, like you have to hold meetings.
I think that the desire to own the libs is just overpowering.
But again, all right. So let me talk to you about that though. Like, is it good that at least the people that have been so saber-rattly about this are now going to actually have to wield this bizarre bureaucracy? I mean, I guess it's like, as long as it doesn't turn into the secret police, which would be the other end fear of it, then it's like, okay, if Dan Bonino's listeners, who are among the tip of the spear of people that are believers in the deep state, if they now believe in the FBI, is that good?
Yeah, it remains to be seen.
Yeah. I guess, presuming that, Adam Schiff is not, found in chains tomorrow, but who knows? All right, Brian, where can people find you?
I don't know. I do. I mean, on the side, next to my other side gig, I do a podcast with Jack Helmuth, the former producer of my show, called Questionable Material.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just comedy stuff, riffing
Just
on
fun.
the news. It's fun.
Just laughing, just joking.
Heaton likes it.
He does.
Yeah.
He does. And we like Heaton. We like Heaton. We had a really good time working with Heaton on the last Christmas special.
Yeah.
Hashing out ideas. That was a good time.
He's a good boy.
All right. Brian Sack, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Justin.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, Politics, Politics. Written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, but edited by our brand new addition to the team, Mr. Will Saddleberg. All of us here for Dog and Pony Show Audio. We are bringing Will on. Will is going to be editing these things, and we are very, very excited to have him. He is somebody that has worked with Dog and Pony Show Audio on World's Greatest Con. He is a current, very, very talented reporter and writer himself for Android Police, for people who are of that persuasion. And we are thrilled to have his talents on this show and hopefully give me a little bit more time that I can do, you know, the slight little extra bit like I did today for the Tea Party. Just looking up some clips and some facts and stuff like that, just to give you a broader context on the political world at large. If you want to email the show, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Find, follow, and share video clips. Justin R. Young on TikTok, Justin R. Young on Instagram, Justin R. Young on Twitter. And if you want to get the full episodes, Politics, Politics, Politics on YouTube. You can support us with a one-time payment, paypal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash, and you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Again, that is Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Of course, you can always get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week, either $3 a week, billed as 12 monthly, or $99 for the entire year. That's 150 episodes of PX3 for only $100. Or you can get our founding tier, which gets you your name read at the end of the podcast, like these fine folks in the Titanic founding tier. L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes, oh yeah, it's Adam, Neil Patel, AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, A Dog Named Trickers, Gloria, Jerry, I don't know why I said it like that. Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, and Ryan, a.k.a. Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show? Come on over. Just come on over. Come on over to TakePoliticsSeriously.com and then sign up at the founding tier. You know, it's a little bit, but, you know, if you want to support the show like this and help us pay for Will, you know, it all matters. We appreciate it. On Friday's edition of the program, we will have Claire Mignon of Le Poix. She is a diligent reporter out there in Washington, D.C. for her French language newspaper. But when we did our survey and we asked you guys some of your favorite guests, she was a recurring one. You didn't know her name? And those of you who knew her name had no idea how to spell it. But the French lady who went to Michigan, boy, we got a bunch of those. And she's got a great perspective on everything that's happened with Europe. So we're going to have another foreign policy conversation. It's great. And she was at CPAC. So we get some CPAC thoughts. Till then, this is your old pal, Justin Robert Young, saying, Some shows talk about politics. Others talk about politics and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh, 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.